So, today we are answering the question that goes back many, many years before our fathers and our fathers' fathers and our fathers' fathers' fathers. Is metalcore metal? How many of you have seen this article that's going around at the moment? It's complete brain-dead trash. Posing the question, is metalcore metal? We are going to just have a quick skim of this horrendous article. Maybe have a little quick deep dive into the history of metalcore. From its origins up until where it's at now. What exactly the state of the genre is. Whether it is indeed metal. It's a question that's been around for roughly as long as metalcore. The fusion genre that melds elements of hardcore punk and extreme metal has existed itself. Of course, even metalcore's invention as a genre is a matter of some debate in its own right. I'm already losing brain cells reading this. But why is it even a question if metalcore, metal is right there in the name, is real metal? What is... So, it's often because metal purists argue it's closer to hardcore due to its vocal styles and rhythms. On the obverse, others maintain that its focus on aggressive, heavy guitar riffs puts it firmly in the metal realm. Sorry, metal realm. Either way, this ever-present argument, with some listeners looking down on it as inferior, is part of why metalcore sometimes gets a bad rap. Fuck this article, man. Like, I'm losing serious amounts of brain cells reading this. So what we're going to do instead, I think, to have our own debate and come to our own conclusions instead of read this trash. So, metalcore. Anyone remember a band called Converge? They were like the catalyst for that modern metalcore sound. You know, it's like the pivotal landmark album of the genre. I always forget what year it came out. 2001. Yeah, it's crazy. See, it's got like the super harsh vocals. It's got like the fucking crushing down-tuned guitars and like chuggy riffs, and it's got like the like this sort of like these interludes that would like come to be very popular in like the very sort of like current metalcore sound, you know, like all like this sort of stuff. It's like the like OG metalcore album. I guess there were some other bands like I think Earth Crisis was like another one. It's a bit more primitive, more of a precursor band rather than a sort of like a, you know, a real like OG band. And then of course after that we get to the early 2000s, sort of like 2003, when you have little known bands like Killswitch Engage, have you heard of them? Or like Avenged Sevenfold, Trivium, Bullet for My Valentine. I mean, back then, like, people sort of called it like the new wave of American heavy metal. What's interesting is that like this wave of metalcore, right, with, you know, the Killswitches and your Avenged Sevenfolds and Triviums, like these were like more influenced in their sound by bands like At the Gates. This was pretty much the blueprint. You can hear like so many bands have like ripped off this style of riffing. This song sounds like fucking every 2000s metalcore band, right? And what year was this? 95. Isn't that insane? This album came out in 1995. It just goes to show how far ahead of this time At the Gates were. It was all fucking based off like Slaughter of the Soul, really. So basically, like, if you take At the Gates and then you sort of add like the hardcore aggression of like Converge and stuff, and then you add, I don't know, like the sort of dueling harmonized guitars of like Iron Maiden and like Judas Priest, and that's pretty much like the formula to these bands, like the classic 2000s metalcore sound. So in my opinion, this is when like metalcore was still very much rooted in traditional metal, right? This is really before sort of like metal and metalcore sort of like started to like do this. So they were sort of like very much one of the same in this era. And I think this is why, like, a lot of, like, you know, traditional, or, like, regular metal fans, or old school metal fans, are still big fans of, you know, bands like Avenged and Trivium. And then, obviously, following the 2000s metalcore stuff, we had a dark, dark time with the rise of what was become to known as, I think, like, molecore. Yeah, that's it, like, crabcore. That's probably a better term, isn't it? Not molecore. I think you had like the big metalcore albums around sort of like 2003, and then like from 2006 you had like the fucking MySpace. So this is when like everyone, you know, had like the fringes like this, and like wore criminally tight jeans, and wore their guitars by their knees, and you know, did this sort of thing. I never got this right. Like, how annoying must it be to have your hair like that? Because, like, surely you can't really see anything through one eye if you're doing that. It's like you fucking have, like, a dead animal, like a deceased critter flopped over your fucking head. I should have got some eyeliner out or something as well. And honestly, like, it cannot be good for your neck to headbang like that. Look at that. Oh! God! So I guess Asking Alexandria are probably, like, the sort of, like, definitive band of that kind of style, right? Oh yeah, I swear like every fucking video in this era, they were always in like the rain. This is what I couldn't get behind with like the screamo side of metalcore. There's like these fucking like nasal ass vocals like it's horrible. It's such a fucking horrible vocal style. It's aged horribly. It's like if you compare this to like Bullet from Valentine. Like it's very cheesy, but it's like it's aged relatively well, I think. In the Rain again, of course. Because, like, yeah, the vocals are whiny, but it's, like, it's not as horrible to listen to. It's more, like, normal singing. Such good songwriting. I kind of call Bullet for Valentine, like, Bullet for My Valentine, the Bon Jovi, for, like, metalcore. Because they wrote these sort of, like, hoppy, like, anthemic bangers. All right, then, of course, after that, the Scene Kids, you know, they thought, like, oh, this is cool, but I feel like we could take this a step further. And then you got stuff like, you know, the early MySpace deathcore. Like Suicide Silence. This album's like fucking loud as well. It's like less compressed and a bit more like raw, and it's just like makes it way heavier. I hate my mom. I hate my school. I hate you all. I'm gonna run away from home. You're never gonna see me again until I realize I only have $5 in my bank account and I have to come back home and I'm hungry. It's just sort of like old school death metal, but with some like, you know, better production, chuggier riffs, and just like the sort of... Up until this point, I still feel that like metalcore was very sort of like much intertwined still with like traditional metal. But we get to the early 2010s and we get bands like Bring Me the Horizon. And this is where they really started to sort of like divert. And I think like Bring Me and Architects were like the sort of the two bands that really sort of like were the catalyst for that. I mean, it's a pretty sick song, to be fair. I mean, like, I swear, like, every other band, they're always playing catch-up with Bring Me. Like, Bring Me have always been, like, the leaders. They've always been, like, trailblazers, which I really respect. The guitars, like, sort of became more, like, genty, and the vocals were sort of, like, starting to get, like, less metal. It's funny, like, with my hair like this, I sort of, I find myself just, like, doing this all the time. Like, oh, yeah, so, like, yeah, like, you know, like, yeah. And you got the odd, like, what? And to be honest, like, listen to this again. It's made me realize that metalcore actually hasn't really come that far since then, has they? That's why, like, bands still regularly write songs like this. This is how far ahead of the game they were. I guess we gotta check out Architects as well, right? I guess, yeah, the next big breakthrough would be, like, Doomsday. It's like every fucking, like, modern metalcore or gent band, like, writes riffs like this. I've heard shit like this like a million fucking times. If we come like right up to date, you know, you've got people like Spirit Box. They have their own sort of sound going on. That's like, yeah, I guess like not super fresh, but like fresh enough. This looks like a promotional poster for like a fucking like tech like startup seminar. Learn how to make $10,000 a day. It's nice. It's very pleasant. And then, of course, you know, you've got everyone's favorite, Sleep Token. I know they're sort of, like, not all-out metal, but, you know, they lean pretty hard into metalcore, right? Especially, like, the newer stuff. You know, like, this is, like, probably as good as, like, this band gets. Like, this song's pretty good. Sleep Token, they're not terrible. They're alright. I just wish they weren't so boring. If they were less boring, I'd fucking love them. And then, like, what else you got? You've got, Bad Omens recently released a song with, was it Poppy? Like, everyone goes on about, like, Sleep Token being so, like, oh, so progressive, so experimental. Not really. You know, Poppy is, like, way more pushing the envelope. These bands, they're, like, very, very genre bending. Like, it's, you know, taking all these different sort of, like, different influences and, like, mashing them up. Just realized this song reminds me of, oh, shit. Remember that crappy, like, dance song from, like, the 90s or something? Hip hop, hip. It's that. This is, like, the... Hear this. It's like the same. Well, maybe not. Man, this goes hard. There we go. A history of metalcore's origins all the way up to current day. So, in conclusion, is metalcore real metal? If you want to be like super broad and pedantic about it, sure, it's all metal. It's all got heavy guitars and loud drums and shit. But, like, really, if you dig a bit deeper, you find, like, these are two very, very different entities now. Metalcore used to be, like, pretty much part of metal, which is, like, a sort of a subgenre of metal. Like, your Trivium, your Avenged Sevenfold, all that stuff. That was definitely, like, firmly rooted in, like, a subgenre of metal. But I think, in, like, the early 2010s, I think there was, like, a real big split And I think now, since then, they've only sort of like got further and further apart. And like, and when I say metalcore isn't metal, I don't mean that in like a derogatory way, not in a bad way. It's just, it's its own thing. It's its own subculture. It's its own like sphere. What made me realize this as well is when I went to the Musician Mansion thing, right, last summer. The majority of the guys there were sort of like, you know, I guess you call them like core kids or whatever. They were like, they're mostly into like their metalcore and deathcore and stuff. And like listening to those guys talk about music, almost like exclusively that sort of music, right, is like what they're into. I sort of found myself just like not being able to participate in these conversations because I'm just sort of like, I don't know anything about what these guys are talking about, right? I don't know these bands. I don't get all these references. Like, it felt like the same as like if I was sitting in a room with a load of people who were like into fucking ska and not just like a different subgenre. Like, this sort of music is like so far removed now from like what I know and they're like familiar with as metal. There's definitely more and more division in like the metal community than ever before between these sort of like two camps. I know a lot of people in both camps, and like the traditional metalheads I know are not interested at all in a lot of like this core stuff. And likewise, the people who I know who are really into like core music, they're not going to be listening to like, I don't know, like fucking Forbidden or like Gorgoroth or Rhapsody. And these are like two different subcultures and two different genres as far as I'm concerned. And so that's kind of like where I think we're at. Is metalcore metal? Yes and no. There you go. Thank you for attending my TED Talk. Metal adjacent. Yeah, there we go. That's a better term.
Beans, good for your heart. The more you eat, the more you fart.